Testing. Neil, can you hear me? Neil, text me if you can hear me. I'm just testing my microphone to tell him we're ready to go whenever he's ready. So Neil, if you can hear me, text me and tell me you're ready to go. You could do that, but that's not fun. Where's my son? Oh, he's right there. Okay. Neil, are you ready? We did last Sunday. Yeah. We still got work to do with it, but yeah. The camera's nice. It's just way better quality than the old one, so you can see the color difference. I don't like that, but I can deal with that. Huh? I have no idea. That's above my pay grade. Any specifications you'd have to talk to Neil about. Camera work, shots, all that kind of, I know that stuff. I don't know anything about the spec. Yeah, I mean, I know you need to do all that. Like angles, I know angles. Like there's certain angles. Like I'm concerned this one's going to be too high, proximity-wise. So I'm worried about that. So we'll see it today. If we don't like it, then we're going to lower it down. So we are live. Okay. All right, are we ready? Because we're going to get started. We're testing new technology, so we'll see how that goes. We are live right now. So mind your P's and Q's, everybody. Okay. Please do. That's perfect. I need to be distracted. So anyway, well, welcome back. It's a little warmer than the last time I saw some of you. Some of you chickens that don't like to leave when it's chilly outside. I don't understand. So anyway, well, hey, we are going to pick up where Isaac left off. And didn't he do a good job last week? He's one of the smartest young men I know. He's got a giant brain underneath that hat. That's what makes his hair stick up in the back. His brain's pushing on it. So just part of it. So I appreciate it. I'm glad to have him here with us. So anyway, we are trying out all sorts of new technology today, so bear with us in case, something goes a little haywire, our live stream and all of that. The TV, as you can tell, is much larger and is higher, and so you'll be able to see things better. You don't have me standing in the way, at least in theory. So I wanted to put this up here. I haven't put this up here yet, but just to understand where we're at. We're in here, this area of 1 Samuel. We're dealing with the monarchy because we're coming out of the time of the judges, and we're going to go into the time of the kings. And it's important that we catch what's going on. The first Samuel catches all of the story about Samuel's life and then the story about Saul. Second Samuel gets into David. Now, obviously, David is introduced in 1 Samuel, but it's talking about his reign. And then you get the Kings and Chronicles and all that other kind of stuff. But right now, this is what we're concerned with. So it's all leading up to eventually going to go to the Babylonian exile. And so I wanted to show you guys a couple of things, kind of piggybacking off of what Isaac said last week in dealing with, man, this technology is not working very well. Go. Look at that. So one of the things that I want to remind you of, and it's important that you catch, is that the capturing of the ark and the ultimate return of the ark, because that plays into part of the story from today. Now, one of the things that you got to remember is that the practice of capturing gods and depositing them in temples was a very common thing. It was called god napping, essentially. Okay? This was very normal. Because remember, what were the battles about? They were the battles between the gods. So everything went off of that. So there were all of these, you find in scriptures, I'm going to read you one here in a minute, about plundered idols. And so from this guy here, he was the Tiglath-Pileser. I don't even know. There's at least 3 of them in his lineage that ruled in Assyria. But from 1115 to 1076 BC, this is what he said. With the mighty power of the god Asher, my lord, I marched to the land of Sugu, of the land of Habhu, and submissive to the god Asher, my lord. I conquered the entire land of Sugu, and I brought 25 of their gods, their booty, their possessions, and their property at that time. I donated the 25 gods of those lands, my own booty, which I had taken, to adorn to the temple of the goddess Ninlil, beloved chief spouse of the gods Asher. My lord, the temple of the gods An and Adad, the temple of the Assyrian Ishtar, the temples of my city Asher, and the goddesses of my land. So you can see he took 25 of their gods. Well, what does he mean? He took 25 of the idols. those things represented the God. In fact, it was believed, it was called opening the mouth of the idols, where they would do some prayer and sacrifice, and the Spirit would then begin to inhabit that. And this is a picture. Here, it's hard to see, it's a little fuzzy, but this, if you look up here, this is an example of them carrying off the gods, carrying off those idols. And so that's what's going on. Now, another thing that was talked about doesn't really come into play, but in the part where they brought the ark. Now, remember, did God have an idol? No. But the ark was taken to battle. And what I'm telling you, you'll see the difference today, is they were using the ark almost like a good luck charm. Like they were going to have luck instead of being devoted to God. If they would just bring that, then the battle will be won, and that's that. So when they captured it, they put it in the temple of Dagon. And we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but the reason that the hands would be cut off and the head eventually is because one thing that they would do when they went and conquered lands is they would decapitate the people, and they would pile the heads up. It was always a sign. And the way they would figure out how many people that they've killed is they cut the hands off. So they would carry them around as if, to show I killed 10 people or whatever, you'd have 20 hands. So this is what was going on. What it was symbolizing was the fact that Yahweh was not defeated. They thought he was defeated because they conquered Israel, brought him into this, and then of course what's he do? Proving he's not. So why do they want to get rid of him so bad? That's why. That plays into what's going on here. That's why I'm kind of rehashing some of this, okay? So let's go to verse 1. Then the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill, and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord. Now, I probably butchered how you pronounce that name, just FYI. Now, we are planning to go to chapter 9 tonight. I don't know if we're going to make it all the way there, but we're going to try. Excuse me. So Kiriath Jearim is known as the city of the woods. It's nearest town to Beth Shemesh. I don't have a bunch of maps for you guys tonight. But the return of the ark was a tangible sign that God was once again among his people. And if his presence is among his people, what does that mean? He'll bless them and deliver them from any oppressor. But what did they learn? The mere presence of the ark did not guarantee victory at all. And where was the ark not taken back to? Shiloh, where it had been. It ends up remaining at the house of Abinadab for 20 years. And what is God doing during this 20-year span? Well, he's got a young prophet named Samuel who's being prepared and is going to rise up and defeat the enemy and ultimately establish the kingdom of Israel underneath its first king. So, verse 2, it says, So it was that the ark remained in Kiriath Jearim a long time. It was there 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. They were sad. They were upset. This is what a lament is. Okay? So Samuel addressed the Israelites for 20 years in Kiriath Jearim. And before Samuel undertook his first recorded public ministry or any of that kind of stuff, this is where it stays. So it had been in Shiloh. Remember I showed you guys where that tabernacle, the temple, had been built. Now it's been moved. It is expected that actually that temple had been destroyed. And that was part of the reason for the move. So it's going to remain in Kiriath Jearim for about 100 years. After it was taken there, it was the Battle of Aphek that actually brings it there, but it's going to stay there until David takes it to Jerusalem. So it's going to sit there for a while. Verse 3. Then Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, If you return to the Lord with all your hearts, then put away the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths from among you, and prepare your hearts for the Lord, and serve him only, and he will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines. Now, remember, the Philistines have been what we call a thorn in the flesh. So, after 20 years, the people are going to prove their loyalty to the Lord by abandoning their foreign gods. So they're putting away the gods of the heathen. Now, what did Moses warn them about? When you go in there, drive them out, don't intermarry, otherwise you're going to end up worshiping their gods. This nation of Israel has fallen into defeat. It's fallen into disrepute, all because of their sins. What are their sins? Syncretism. It wasn't a matter of just worshiping Yahweh. It was a matter of they were also worshiping Yahweh, but they were worshiping other gods. So when it says things about putting away the Baals and the Ashereth, it's showing how syncretistic Israelite worship had become. It was no longer what it should have been. And this was not a recent development. This was something that had been going on since the time of the judges. And so serving the Baals and the Ashtoreths was a recurrent problem that they had. It was always going on. Now, here are the three names that you are going to see. You see Baal and Ashtoreth, but you also have Dagon. So it gives you an idea what he looks like. You can see he's got fish scales and things like that. We're not going to get too deep into this stuff. But Baal's name means Lord, owner, or husband. He was a Canaanite god of fertility and storm. And so he corresponds with the Mesopotamian god Hadad, whose name means thunderer. That will matter here in a moment. The father of Baal, according to both Mesopotamian and Syrian sources, is Dagon. Now, when we think of gods, this is not how we think of gods. We think of gods that have no beginning and no end. That was not true for them. Okay? So you have to begin to get in the mind of what an Israelite looks like. Ashtoreth, or also known as Astarte, was a goddess of fertility and war. Now, she goes by several names, but the bottom line is, again, I don't want to get into the weeds with all of this because that's not the point of this, but she is known as one of the queens of heaven. So you'll see Ishtar and Isis and some of these other names that go with it. Baal and Ashtoreth were sometimes associated with specific locations like Baal Hazor, Baal Hermon, and things like that. But when we see this, it simply means a local manifestation. In other words, this is where the god was. But oftentimes when it references the Baals and the Ashtoreth, it's not talking about just the specifics god. They were kind of used as an idiom to all foreign gods. So it wasn't that they were just worshiping the Baals or just worshiping the Ashtoreths. It's the fact that they need to rid themselves of all foreign gods. So this was the command that was given. So how do they respond to that? Well, they respond to it as you would expect. In this case, if this thing goes, the children of Israel put away the Baals and the Ashtoreths and served the Lord only. That's your key to know. It wasn't that they were exclusively worshiping Baal or Ashtoreth. It was the fact that they were being syncretistic. The plural Baals and Ashtoreths describes that there were local shrines, many of them, all around. So understand what's happening here is they were being syncretist. This is the same kind of stuff that goes on today. It wasn't that they weren't worshiping Yahweh. They were. But they were kind of going through the motion while worshiping these other gods. So this was a culture of polytheism. Verse 5, and Samuel said, "Gather all Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray the Lord for you." So they're going to bring them in. Now, what you see here is Samuel he is a man of prayer. The priesthood was decayed. The nation was defeated, and God's glory had departed. So he brings the nation back to Mizpah for essentially what's going to be a prayer meeting. He was a man known for prayer. He's a product of his mother's prayer. He prays for his nation, and they defeat the enemy. You're going to see that here shortly. He prays for Israel when they defied the Lord and asked for a king. You're going to see that momentarily. And he even prays for King Saul later on after God rejects him because he doesn't want to. This is a man of prayer. So this is what he's known for. So they gathered together in Mizpah, drew water, and poured it out before the Lord. And they fasted that day and said there, "We have sinned against the Lord." And Samuel judged the children of Israel at Mizpah. Now, Mizpah was a meeting place of a national level. This is where they would assemble on many, many occasions. The elders of the tribes would gather there to decide Benjamin's fate following the murder of a Levite concubine. That's in Judges 19. Okay, Saul is going to be presented as king in Mizpah, and the capital of Judah after the destruction of Jerusalem becomes Mizpah. So, kind of an important place. Mizpah is associated with Mount Scopus, which means watchtower or watchmen. Now, you see something interesting here that is not listed other place. You have a libation ceremony, the pouring out of water. The only thing that we have in association with this is the Feast of Tabernacles, which I'm not indicating is what's going on here. But they would have wine libations where they would pour out a drink offering. But this is the first one that was water. And in fact, it's the only one that's water outside of the association with the Feast of Tabernacles, which I told you guys about a few weeks ago, about the water ceremony and what they would do. It was a week-long event. And then on the last and great day of the feast, they would go 7 times and pour out water and all that stuff. So this is interesting. Now, We don't have any idea why. You could talk about water washing the nation clean, and there may be something with that, but it doesn't specifically tell us. So we're not exactly sure. So we have no parallels. There's no other thing in the Old Testament that has a water libation. So we're not really sure what this has to do with it. It says, now when the Philistines heard that the children of Israel had gathered together at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And when the children of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. So the children of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, that he may save us from the hand of the Philistine. And Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. And Samuel cried out to the Lord for Israel, and the Lord answered him. Now what had they been doing just prior to this? Been coming to Mizpah to worship the Lord. And then all of a sudden, the Philistines respond. How did they respond? They heard that they had gathered, so the Lord of the Philistines went up against Israel. What we often lose sight of, and this is why I was talking about this before we started, the spiritual side of this, of everything that went on in the Old Testament. Why do the Philistines attack the Israelites when they're gathering for a religious observance? The reason being is in the Near East, rituals were generally performed prior to military initiatives. If they were associated with a typical festival, they would be dismissed. It was no big deal. They were always watching one another. But they heard that they went to Mizpah. This is not tied to anything else. So what do you think they're assuming? Israel's getting ready to attack. That is what they're assuming. So they're making an offering to their God so that they will have favor in the battle. So one of the ways the spies or informers could tell that military action was about to take place is because they would gather somewhere and they would have a sacrifice. They would have some sort of a religious thing that was going on. It doesn't say that. This is the part of knowing the history and the culture of the time. It will help you understand this stuff. Now, Samuel summons the people to Mizpah. He prays for them, and they offer a sacrifice to the Lord on their behalf. That is vastly different than when they went against the Philistines the last time, where they simply took the ark and said, okay, let's go do this. Because now, because even at that time, what were they worshiping? The Baals, the Ashtoreths, and Yahweh. Now they're trusting God and not the ark. See, they thought by just taking the ark, then we're good. Because the ark is the throne of God, if you will. So therefore, if we just take this, we can't lose. But their hearts were wrong. So now they're trusting God and not just the ark. So now as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But the Lord thundered with a loud thunder upon the Philistines that day, and so confused them that they were overcome before Israel. Now, did you catch the little part that's kind of funny there? The thunder. What's so funny about that? It goes exactly against their God. Why? Dagon, Baal, the father of Baal. The Philistines had the ark inside of that. And the name of that God is the God of thunder. It was associated with that. Yahweh brings thundering down, and it's a sign to them. It's a mighty demonstration of power by utilizing thunder. So, again, all of these things matter when you know the history of what's going on here. And the men of Israel went out to Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and drove them back as far as below Beth-kar. And then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen and called its name Ebenezer, saying, thus far the Lord has helped us. Now, does Ebenezer sound familiar? What's that? Ebenezer Scrooge. Okay. Fair enough. What? Still can't hear you. Well, that's part of this, yes. But, so they tried to force God's hand by bringing the ark into the battle, and the place was called Ebenezer. So he sets up a memorial stone with the name Ebenezer, which means the stone of help. And it says, thus far the Lord has helped us. Why does he say thus far? I mean, he acknowledges God's decisive role in the victory, and so it'll serve as a reminder, certainly. But The results were brought about by presumption on the one hand and penitence on the other. In other words, if you do right, I will go with you. I will fight your battles for you. They're doing right now. The other part of it is it could be a boundary stone as well, saying that the Philistines can't cross here. So it's hard to say for sure exactly what it is, but these are some of the common things that you would see with this. Verse 13. Come on. Didn't work this time. Go. Please. Please. What the heck? Our technology is failing us. It's all wireless right now. Well, it's changed here. There it is. Look at that. 30 seconds later. So the Philistines were subdued, and they did not come any more into the territory of Israel, and the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. So from that day on, the Philistines are kept at a distance. Now this is what's interesting. Samuel accomplishes with one prayer a victory that Samson could not win in 20 years. Think about that. It shows you the difference of what's going on here. That the devotion to God mattered. I'm going to have to just automatically click to the next one whenever I'm done. There it goes. Then the cities which the Philistines had taken from Israel were restored to Israel, from Ekron to Gath. And Israel recovered his territory from the hands of the Philistines. And also, there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. Now, the Amorites refer to hill dwellers. I'm going to go ahead and click ahead because, now it's going to work. Perfect. They're known as hill dwellers, okay? So several passages mention the Bible name Amorite, but it has to do with the inhabitants of Canaan is really all it has to do with. Verse 15. Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, and he went year to year on a circuit to Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, and judged Israel in all those places. Now, Gilgal becomes the center of religious life, civil life of Israel. And so he's going to have this national assembly that convenes there when they bring together an army and all this other stuff when they get into battle. But ultimately, it's just he's going to go on this circuit. And this circuit looks something like this. Oh, I should have clicked that sooner. Okay, we'll try this one first. He always returns to Ramah, for his home was there, and he judged Israel, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Try again. Okay. Home is where he's going to sit, but he's going to follow this loop. If I can get this map to come up. You can see it on your paper. This is why I print stuff for you too. But it's on your paper. I have a map there. It's got the 6 cities that he goes to. This will eventually come up, I think. But there it goes. So Ramah's home, so he kind of works his way up and around. So it's about a 50-mile circle. And he's going on foot most of the time. So for the next 30 years, this is kind of how he does it. He was a prophet. He was a judge. He travels in this circuit, and he's going to deal with all the nonsense stuff that goes on. So this is civil judgments. This is religious judgment. All of this kind of stuff. Criminal judgment. I mean, whatever it was, he goes in there. They would come to him. This was standard practice with whatever's going on, and he would speak on their behalf, on behalf of the Lord ultimately. So, well, that one went fast. Here we go. Let's go to chapter 8, verse 1. How are we doing on time? Now it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. And the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abijah. And they were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. Does this sound familiar? Sounds similar to the sons of Eli. Now, I don't think they were as bad as the sons of Eli because he set them as judges in Beersheba. So what did? They took dishonest gain. What does that mean? It can mean a lot of things. They took bribes. That one's kind of self-explanatory. And they perverted justice. In other words, they were not walking on what was right. They were walking on who paid the most. So this is a problem. Do you think that Israel and the people of Israel in that region, when they came to him or came to these guys, were going to want something like that because it wasn't a fair case? No. So what do you think this is going to lead to? They're going to want somebody else to do this because Samuel's getting old. And so, just like Eli did not take care of his sons, this is a problem for Samuel as well. So then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "Look, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the other nations." Now, here's what they're afraid of. If Samuel goes, because Samuel's still in charge, but what happens to a nation when it loses its ability to do things the correct way? I honestly think we're starting to see some of that in our own nation today. We are seeing more and more of this stuff play out. But be that as it may, I don't want to get off on that, is that it may return them to a time of which everybody did things that were right in their own eyes, and that brought judgment upon their nation. And they are concerned with this. And so how can we solve that? Remember, we're not dealing with a nation as a whole. We're dealing with a collection of tribes. So the similarities you put, when you had the original 13 colonies and then they became the United States of America, that was the difference. Each colony was self-governed. They did it collectively as a whole. They got along, but they were not underneath the same rules until they became the United States. That's the same thing. Every tribe had its own elders that would take care of the day-to-day and all of the stuff that was going on, and therefore there was no national governance. What they would do is they would come to Samuel and say, "What do we do in this situation?" Well, if you have a king, that solves your problem. So they don't want to mess with this. Saul is going to become king shortly after this, but Samuel's going to be like 70 years old. I mean, he's not a spring chicken. So they're going to demand that they pick a king to rule over them. God had been the king of Israel. And Israel has an attempt to force a human monarchy. This isn't the first time. You see this also in Judges 8, verse 22. It says, "Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, 'Rule over us, both you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian.' But Gideon said to them, 'I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you.'" They say the same thing with George Washington, that they had tried to get him to become a king for the nation. And he said, "No, we are not going to operate that way." He refused it. Gideon did the right thing. Why? God was their king. And essentially by demanding a king, they're saying, "Well, God, you're not doing so great. We want something better. We want something different." Now, Moses prophesied that they would have a king. In Deuteronomy 17, verse 14, he says, "When you come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you and possess it and dwell in it, and say, 'I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me, you shall surely set a king over you whom the Lord your God chooses. One from among your brethren you shall set as king over you. You may not set a foreigner over you who is not your brother.'" So this was a known thing that was coming. It just wasn't coming yet. Samuel, of course, is going to be grieved by this, because God redeems him from Egypt to be his people. He was their king. And the institution of a monarchy is going to separate the civil from the religious leadership. It's going to begin to change things. And they're going to have a political history independent of their religious one. So this is not what God wanted, at least not yet. Verse 6, "But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to judge us.'" So what did Samuel do? He did what Samuel always does. He took it to the Lord in prayer. He fully understood that their unbelief and rebellion was rejecting God. So it wasn't a rejection of Samuel necessarily, it was a rejection of God. Verse 7, "And the Lord said to Samuel, 'Heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For they have not rejected you, they've rejected me, and I should not reign over them. According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day with which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also. Now therefore heed their voice. However, you shall solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them.'" Now, the request of the king is not necessarily improper, because God had promised such a leader. And it's even in Ruth chapter 4, you can kind of see that this is coming down the pike. But the absolute refusal to wait for God's timing clearly displeases the Lord. They have not rejected you. They've rejected me. And even though I brought them out of Egypt, and all the things that I've done, this is what they have. So give them what they want. This is kind of an idea of God's permissive will. This isn't what I want, this is what they want. Give them what they want, but warn them and let them know. So Israel's tribal structure had no provision for a human centralized authority. Moses provided prophetic authority. Joshua had been granted military authority, and no one took over for Joshua when that time came. So Moses had been understood to be the intermediary, and he gave God's instructions as God led the people. So he was kind of the go-between. Joshua was subordinate to God's commander, and the victories were always the Lord's victories. This is why they just took the ark. Oh, we just take the ark, we're good to go. It's not a good luck charm. So each tribe had its leadership, but central authority belonged to one person only, and that is God. And so the judges were those that the Lord had raised up, and it kind of gave authority temporarily. But God was seen as raising up military leaders, and he was the one who brought the victories, demonstrating that God was the one who was king. He would lead them out, and he would bring them in. This is what the kings do. You'll see this later in time with David and Bathsheba at the time that the kings were out to war. They should be leading people out. So, victory in battle was assured if the Lord was pleased with them. And the leaders here are implying that God has been less than successful in bringing victory, and that somehow a human king will do a much better job. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And so what they did is they immediately said, okay, thanks for the warning. We'll change our minds. No problem. We'll just stick with what's working here. So, again, this is a demonstration of God's permissive will. This is not what he wanted, but this is what it is. He's going to grant them their request, but he warned them of the cost. Verse 11. This will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots. He will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his 50s. He will set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and some to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cookers, and bakers. He will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officers and servants. And he will take your male servants, female servants, your finest young men, and your donkeys, and put them to his work. He will take a tenth of your sheep, and you will be his servants, and you will cry out in that day because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourself, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. Sounds like a pretty fair trade, doesn't it? This is exactly what's going to happen when you put a human king over there, especially the one they're getting ready to get. Now, as I said before, Moses had prophesied about that. We read verse 14, but I want to read past this. So watch what it says. When you come into the land which the Lord your God is giving you, possess it and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations are around me. Who's making the request? They're making the request. You shall surely set a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses. Well, who's going to choose the king? God's going to choose the king. And from among your brethren you shall set as a king over you. You may not set a foreigner over you who is not your brother. There it is. But he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. Also it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this law in a book, from the one before the priests, the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, and that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. Now, what does this sound like to you? Does this sound like a typical king? No. The emphasis here falls on God himself as the great king, and the human king to serve not as a demigod, but as a vassal king or a vice regent to Yahweh. That's the thing here. You've got to keep in mind, part of the issues that they had, these other nations, is that the kings were seen as gods. But Israel is so unique. So when they stole the ark, they thought, oh goodness, we're taking, we've defeated Yahweh, we're taking him. No, they weren't. They couldn't defeat him. The other part of that is this king does not receive worship. He serves the people. He's the vice regent of the great king. And so it makes the king, here, the king in Israel is to be subservient to the divine law and must not consider himself better than his brothers. Why did it tell him he needs to write down a copy of the law? How else are you going to know it? So, this is what's happening here. This is what's going on. There's going to be taxes. There's going to be military things they didn't want to do. But shortly after Saul ascends to the throne, many of these predictions come to pass. Verse 19. Maybe. Please. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. They said, no, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. That's what God had been doing. Now they're asking God not to do that anymore. Now, you notice what is the one key here that they said? We will have a king over us, that we will be like all the nations. What is one thing about Israel that they were supposed to be? Not like all the other nations. Everything that they did was supposed to be separating. Keep them different. This is the honoring of the Sabbath. It was something that no other nation did. Now, what led to this? Samuel's sons were not godly, and the elders feared that they would lead the nation astray when Samuel died. The nation had been through a series of temporary leaders during the time of the judges. The elders wanted something a little more permanent. And then Israel wanted to be like the other nations and have a king to honor. Powerful nations around Israel were a constant threat, and they felt that a human king would give them greater security. Can you imagine? They struggled with faith just like we do. Did it go? And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he repeated them in the hearing of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, heed their voice and make them a king. And Samuel said to the men of Israel, everyone go to his city. So he's kicking them out. They're moving on. Now, we're going to go through chapter 9. It won't take too long. Oh, we're doing okay on time. Now, this is going to tell us how Saul gets to Samuel, and he's going to get anointed for kingship. And there's a lot of little nuances in here we often miss. Ugh, hold on. Oh, wow, that's way behind. If you have any suggestions how to make that work better, I'm all ears. I was afraid you were going to say that. Okay. There it is. So this is chapter 9, verse 1. It says, there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, and the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah, and a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. And he had a choice and a handsome son whose name was Saul. There was not a more handsome person than he among the children of Israel. From his shoulders upward he was taller than any of the people. So he was tall, ruddy, and good looking. He's a perfect king. Now, the tribe of Benjamin comes from the youngest son of Jacob. And it had nearly been exterminated during a civil war. You see this in Judges chapter 20 and 21. Its allotment as a tribe was very small, but it was placed right between two very powerful tribes in Judah and Ephraim. So, the things about Saul that makes him unique. He was tall. He was good looking. He also is going to be quite naive and very unkingly in many ways. He comes from a town named Gibeah. And this is where a concubine of a Levite who sought hospitality was raped and killed in Judges chapter 19. So, this is that town. It wasn't all that long ago. There it goes. Now the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost, and Kish said to his son, please take one of the servants with you, and arise, go and look at the donkeys. And he passed through the mountains of Ephraim and through the land of Shalisha, but they did not find them. They passed through the land of Shalim, but they were not there. Then he passed through the land of the Benjamites, but they did not find them. And when they come to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, come, let us return, lest my father cease caring about the donkeys and become worried about us. So they're looking everywhere. They go and they're in this region. They can't find it. But they're going to end up in the home of Samuel, the hometown of Samuel eventually. Come on. And he said to them, look now, there is in the city a man of God, and he is an honorable man. All that he says surely comes to pass, so let us go there. Perhaps he can show us the way that we should go. And Saul said to his servants, but look, if we go, what shall we bring the man? For the bread in our vessels is all gone, and there is no present to bring the man of God. What do we have? Now, this is kind of important, and it shows kind of the ignorance of Saul here. Because Samuel was a seer. And so seers and prophets are basically one and the same. A prophet was known primarily as a seer. There are different Hebrew words for this. But it's a major thrust of his ministry, and he's associated with receiving divine revelation. Prophets later become more proclaimers of revelation. Okay, but you'll see these terms, they'll often be used interchangeably, even though they don't have to be. So prophets were both seers and proclaimers, but being a seer could mean something more. And so bottom line is he's looking, he says, we have nothing to bring him. What do we bring him? This is an ignorance that Saul has. Because I'm waiting on this to go. Under the laws that they had, a prophet was not supposed to receive any sort of fee for his service. Now, this was not normal for other nations. Because when they would go to any sort of a seer or anything like that, a payment was expected or even demanded. But prophets of God were not supposed to receive anything for it. Why do you think that is? Because you can manipulate people with that. So there are stories about this. Let me read you one. There was one called the Shockhead of Dagon or Dagon. It refers to a female who was given to trances, and she had unkempt hair. This is why she was called a shockhead. But she was a prophet of Dagon. And she would deliver a prophetic message concerning the king, and her request or her demand was a straight ewe wool garment and a nose rope. Okay? Now, unsolicited prophetic revelation, which is what most biblical prophecy is, often was delivered without any expectation of payment. But the biblical writing prophets express extreme disapproval for prophesying for money. Amos denies being a prophet who will take money. Micah condemns prophets who divine money for money. We know the whole story about Balaam. This is stuff that went on. Do you guys know the story about Joseph Smith? He was known as a treasure hunter. You guys know who Joseph Smith is? Okay. He had what was called a seer stone. And he would take this stone and he would put it in his top hat and he would look and he could find treasure on people's properties. And so these are the same stone that he used to translate the golden tablets that became the Book of Mormon. But what he would do is he would go and he would take something from somebody and he would go and hide it someplace on their farm and they're looking for it. And so he would say, I can find that for you, but this is my fee. And they'd say, oh, okay. So they'd pay him. He'd use the seer stone. He would find it. So he was proving himself. This is all documented. And then he would tell them that he believed that there was buried treasure on their land. So they would pay him money. And so they would sacrifice a black goat. They would draw a circle in the blood, and they would begin to dig. And every single time that either something broke the spell, and therefore the treasure was moved, or a spirit would come and take the treasure and hide it somewhere else, so they never found it. This was what is known as treasure hunting. The Mormon church has been forced to confess these things of recent times because this is documented in American history. He was sent to jail numerous times. But this is the type of stuff. So, think about this. There are prophets for hire today. How many of you guys have seen some of the stuff going on in the prophetic movement right now? You guys notice all the calling to the carpet that's been happening? Maybe you haven't. Many of the big name prophets are being called out for faking prophecies now. They have been busted. Okay? I don't want to get sidetracked with all of that, but if you guys recall, for many years now, I have said the prophetic movement might as well be called the pathetic movement because it has not been doing what it should be doing. And now they're starting to hold these men accountable, and women, primarily men though. So, all I'm saying, biblically speaking, a prophet of God did not take payment for his service. This is also talked about with Josephus. It says, the servant answered that he'd still the fourth part of a shekel, and he would present him with that. For they were mistaken out of ignorance, as not knowing that the prophets received no such reward. In other words, they were going to try to pay the prophets, but that was out of ignorance. So why did Saul say that? Well, we don't have anything to give him. It shows you that he does not know what is going on here. He has a religious ignorance. He had been a product of the land and the other customs that were going around. Now let's go on. Maybe. Come on. What's that? I guess. Slowing me down too much. And I'm always afraid to click too far ahead because then it'll get past me. Come on. Please. Pretty please. Please, please, please. If I hit it, will that help? You want me to? I don't want to break it. Well, let's just look on our sheet. Let's go to verse 8. That's the book, Antiquity and Josephus' Antiquities, book 6, chapter 48. No, this is a historical writing by a man named Josephus. He was a Roman historian during the time of Christ. And so he chronicles a lot of the different things that went on, including aspects of the scriptures, including even the life of Jesus. He didn't recognize Jesus as anything supernatural, but even references him in that he said to this man, if you could call him such a thing, because he noted the miracles that he had done. So, here we are, chapter 8. Good questions, good timing. And the servant answered Saul again and said, look, I have here at hand 1/4 of a shekel of silver. That's about a week's wage. I will give that to the man of God to tell us our way. Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he spoke thus, come, let us go to the seer, for he who is now called a prophet was formerly called a seer. Do you guys know what this is an example of? You see how it's set up apart? How is formerly in Israel when a man went to inquire of God? So in other words, this is giving explanation that at the time that the scribe wrote, this is a scribal addition explaining something to the current readers, that when they went to the seer, those are now called prophets. So at the time that this book was being copied, they will put little markers in there to explain it at the time. You'll see it was cities. It was named this city. Now we know it as this. So these are things that the scribes would put in there to bring clarity to the current readers. They didn't have access to everything like you and I did. Nobody had scrolls rolling around. You know, does that make sense? You look confused. Yes. So you can use the terms interchangeably. Seers typically see more versus just proclaim more. But what they're saying is that term seer, they now call them prophets. So in case the readers at the time may not have known what that term meant. And that's why they were letting them know the difference. They were known as seers, they were prophets. That's just what we call them now. And so you can use those terms interchangeably. So if somebody's a seer, they will often see things, visions, dreams, things like that more often than not. But not everybody does see that stuff. So, anyway, Saul said to his servant, well said, come, let us go. So they went to the city where the man of God was. And they went up the hill to the city. They met some young women going out to draw water and said to them, is the seer here? And they answered them and said, yes, there he is, just ahead of you. Hurry now, for today he came to the city, because there is a sacrifice of the people today on the high place. As soon as you come into the city, you will surely find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. For the people will not eat until he comes, because he must bless the sacrifice. Afterwards, those who are invited will eat. Now therefore, go up, for about this time you will find him. So they went up to the city, and as they were coming to the city, there was Samuel coming out toward them on his way up to the high place. Excuse me, my goodness. So, go back a little bit here. Let's read one more. Oh, go. Now the Lord had told Samuel in his ear the day before Saul came, saying, tomorrow, about this time, I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him commander over my people Israel, that he may serve my people from the hand, save my people from the hand of the Philistines. For I have looked upon my people, because their cry has come to me. So the Lord had already warned him that he's going to meet this man, and when you meet him, you'll know. So what about these high places? When we hear the term high place, it means a place of worship where an altar is functioning. Generally, it is elevated, but most of the time, it is not just an open-air shrine. It typically is some sort of an indoor facility that had sacred furniture and things that were large enough to accommodate a priesthood. So it's not just like go up on the top of the hill and make a sacrifice. There's usually more to it than just that. So he's going up to the high places. God had already told him that when you're going to see a man tomorrow. And so when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said to him, there he is, the man of whom I spoke to you. This one shall reign over my people. So he is going to see him, and he is going to basically grab his attention. He had a physical impressiveness, and that was about the only thing he had going for him. Come on. Then Samuel drew near to Samuel in the gate and said, please tell me, where is the seer's house? And Samuel answered Saul and said, I'm the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for you shall eat with me today, and tomorrow I will let you go and will tell you all that is in your heart. Now, it's a big deal getting invited. That wasn't what they were trying to get him before, because only those who are invited go to the meal. So he invites them, doesn't know them. Samuel knows Saul, but Saul doesn't know Samuel. But as for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, do not be anxious about them, for they have been found, and on whom is all the desire of Israel? Is it not on you and all your father's house? And Saul answered, am I not a Benjamite, of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin? Why then do you speak like this to me? Now, did you see anywhere, I'm trying to go back here, they're going to meet the seer. They stumble across the seer. They find out about him. He's warned about him. Samuel sees Saul. There he is, the man who I spoke to you. So Saul drew near to Samuel. What was the question he asked him? Where's the seer's house? That's all he asked. Where's it at? And Samuel said, well, I'm the seer. Go with me. Go to the high place. You'll eat with me today, and tomorrow I'll let you go, and I'll tell you all that is in your heart. Did he ask him about the donkeys? Not even a little. We often miss that little nuance there. But he never asked him about the donkeys, and that was the whole reason he was going there. Now, when he says, am I not a Benjamite? So this is an honor. You're getting called up with the prophet. When he says, am I not a Benjamite, the smallest of the tribes of Israel, my family, the least of all the families of the tribe of Benjamin, why then do you speak to me like this? In other words, what are you doing? It's a recognition of his unworthiness of this high honor. This is a transparency and humility that he is going to eventually lose. Kings often will try to attach some significance to their ancestry. And in this case, there is none. And the weakness can be used as a reason to revolt by some ambitious competitor that is trying to take over the throne. Well, here, he's talking about, wait a minute, we're the smallest tribe and my family is the least in the tribe, and you want me to come up with you. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But Samuel took Saul and his servant and brought them into the hall and had them sit in the place of honor among those who were invited. There were about 30 persons. So he invites him, and he sits at the most prestigious seat in the place. 30 people. Samuel said to the cook, bring the portion which I gave you, of which I said you set it apart. And the cook took up the thigh with its upper part and set it before Saul. And Samuel said, here it is, what was kept back. It was set apart for you. Eat, for until this time it has been kept for you, since I said I invited the people. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. And when they come down from the high place into the city, Samuel spoke with Saul on top of the house. So the choice of meat, the thigh was considered one of the prime cuts. We don't consider that anymore, do we? Is the thigh the good cut of the cow? What's the best cut of the cow? I agree. So this is what they look at. I don't know what they sacrificed exactly. It may not have been a cow, but so this meat was usually reserved for the officiating priest. In this case, that would have been Samuel, likely. But he yields this to his guest as a moment of honor for them. So this is a big deal. So what do you think is going through Saul's head? Because he'd have some recollection of this stuff. First of all, were you not blown away by the fact that he brought up the donkeys and you didn't? I would have been like, what? And then you get taken up. You're not supposed to get invited because you're nothing and you're just out looking for donkeys, and now I'm going to go have dinner with the prophet? That's crazy. Then you sit at the high seat. That's crazy. Then you're going to give me the choice cut. That's crazy. Like, all of this stuff is kind of mind-blowing for him. So they arose early, and it was about the dawning of the day that Samuel called to Saul. The top of the house, remember, they always had that upper floor. So the bottom floor usually kept the animals. The other full part of the floor, the second story, if you will, often would be like where they would stay and all of that. And then the rooftop that would have the ability to hang out up there. So he called Saul on the top of the house and says, "Get up that I may send you on your way." And Saul arose, and both of them went outside, and he and Samuel. And as they were going down to the outskirts of the city, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the servant to go on ahead of us." And he went on, "But you stand here a while, that I may announce to you the word of God." Which is where we're going to end, because we know what's coming next. He's going to eventually anoint him as king. But there's so much going on. And when you start, again, this is why we spend so much time going through this. When you start to see the little details and nuances of what's going on historically, it makes the parts make sense. Like, how many of you guys realize that the stealing of the God napping was a big deal? Most of the time we don't know that. So we think this weird encounter where they take the ark in, like, why would they even do that? And then you have this next part where he falls over and his hands break off and then he gets decapitated and they can't get rid of this thing fast enough. Well, it's weird, but it doesn't make much sense until you realize that they realize we have not defeated the gods of Israel, which plays a part into the future of Goliath coming out and saying, "I defy the armies of the living God." This is a thing. This is a theme. Spiritual warfare has physical implication. It was true then. It's true now. So why am I telling you this? Is don't fall for the stuff that's going on in the media today. Don't get sucked into this nonsense. It's true then. It's true now. Any questions? I know that was a lot. Guys, there's no good way to break up these sections. There's no clear delineation that we can just, oh, here's a good stopping point. So I tried to just fill about an hour. I was concerned I wasn't going to get through it all tonight, but we made it. So that's good. So no questions? Well, let's close out in prayer then. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you that it is true, Lord. We just stand on it. Lord, I pray that you'd open our hearts to really receive from you, to let these words sink in, the principles that are in them, Lord, so that we can understand them and know them. Lord, that our lives would begin to glorify you in even greater, greater form, Lord. That we never take a moment for granted, and that we have discernment operating in our lives to recognize the spirits behind all things that are still active and engaging in the world around us, Lord. That we'd be not deceived by the nonsense that we see. Lord, that we would just rest in you. It's in your mighty name we pray. Amen. Y'all have a great week. We will see you Sunday.